BRN, where educators share what works.
That's a good question. I mean, how much is too much and how do you know? I found out by experimenting in the classroom.
Morning, everybody.
Morning. Good morning.
Morning, Dan.
John, I'm glad to see you came back for another week.
A lot of fun last week. I enjoyed it, but happy to be back.
Well, good. Well, hey, guys, I ran across something that really piqued my interest. I wanted to throw it out to you all and see kind of what you thought. It was in regards to an over-reliance on the use of AI and whether or not that diminishes skills. When I read the article, it was talking about students using AI to study, saying that students who were just trying to get answers out of it did extremely poorly on a test. But students who got feedback on, study habits or whatever, did better than those that were just trying to use it to get answers. And so I'm wondering, at what point do we pull the reins back a little bit instead of, just letting the horses run wild in regards to how either we use it or our students use it?
I let the horses run wild.
I know you do.
So last semester I did a course where we did a design thinking project. Again, I've got university students. We did a cross-disciplinary course doing a design thinking project where students were trying to identify a problem at the university and then go through the design thinking process and try and come up with a solution. And you do things like interview people and empathy mapping and the 5 whys and all these different things. And I treated myself as a student on this course. I was trying to identify a problem and come up with a solution as well. And we looked at different AI tools every lesson to do this. Now, what I realized a few weeks in was how I used the tools, the AI tools, and how the students were using them were very different. And the results we were getting were very, very different. And this got me thinking, why is this? And I drilled it down to a couple of things. The first thing is, I'm 50 years old. I've been in education for many years. I'm a professional. I already know how to do a lot of the things I was asking my students to do with the critical thinking and the interviews. And so I knew before using AI what I needed to do. And I think because of that, I was able to use it well. Also, I have a real interest in finding solutions to problems at the university by looking through this AI lens. Now, for my students, they didn't have this foundational background that I have. They're only in their early 20s. And also, they didn't have this drive to find the solutions. For them, it was simply a project to do for the university to get a grade. And therein, I found 2 big differences. It's knowing how to use it and having the foundational skills, but also having a real purpose at the end of it.
I agree with that. You know what I equate this to, and maybe this sounds funny? We tend to keep giving students computers. I rarely see a foundational course on how to use it as a tool. We just assume kids know technology and they know how to use technology, and we don't teach them how to keyboard. And people are going to say, oh, you don't have to know how to keyboard because you could talk to the computer. I think that's BS. I'm sorry. I see kids like hunched over, pecking, and they're trying to put out something, but it takes them forever because we never taught them the foundational skills of keyboarding, digital safety, how to truly navigate the shortcuts in computers, the operating system. We just kind of give it to them and say, go. So I'm agreeing with Caroline. There have to be those basic foundational skills first before you learn a new tool. And then you will know better how to use the tool. If you're just trying to get quick answers, do that all day. No need to remember anything. But that's not teaching you a different level of critical thinking.
Now, John, I know you work with younger students. Do they all get Chromebooks when they're like kindergarten, first grade? When do you see your students getting Chromebooks?
Actually, we have students that are in pre-K that have access, that are 4 years old, that have access to iPads. But it's interesting because I just coincidentally happened to listen to a podcast episode yesterday with psychologist Daniel Willingham. This was just by chance, and he was talking about memory and learning. And this made me think about what we were probably going to talk about today, because he was trying to apply some of his own principles, and he found that oftentimes we remove the challenging part of learning a skill. Like, he had all these studies and suggestions, and he gave them to his students, and when they came back, they didn't do well because they didn't want the struggle. And he kind of compared it to someone who wants to learn how to do push-ups. He said, there was this friend of his that wanted to get better at push-ups, and so they checked on him, and he said, yeah, I can do 100 push-ups on my knees. And he said, yeah, but you're trying to do push-ups, regular push-ups. That's a whole different thing. And he said, a lot of times we don't practice, we remove the struggle. And because we remove the struggle, we're not learning. It's like practicing a speech by reading it over and over, he said. He said the best way to practice a speech is to practice it with just notes, the way we're going to do it live. And it got me thinking a little bit about the AI, because sometimes I think, kind of like what Caroline was saying, we know what we know, but we don't know what the kids don't know. But in learning, I think sometimes we're thinking about the product and not the skill.
Yeah, process is more important than product. We've said that before, but it does seem we're always trying to just get to the product and check it off. We're moving on to the next thing.
That's how our education systems are set up. So we know that the process of learning is the most important thing, but through our education systems, ultimately our students have to get grades, they have to pass levels, they have to get a high school certificate, they have to get a university degree. So we're showing in that way that we're valuing the product more than the process. And I think quite often the process can get lost because of the way we structured the education system.
And the same with the students in America is the same with the teachers. What's the evaluation scale for teachers? And having the conversation that you're learning something is more derogatory than saying I've mastered it, because that's not our culture or our mindset. Whether my scale for evaluation is a 1 through a 4 or words, I need to always be in that 4 or I feel unsuccessful.
And that's so true. If we don't have answers, we feel very unsuccessful. I think that's one of the temptations of using the AI so often, is because we desperately want to have an answer for everything. And I mean, there are times where I'm searching, how to best help my own children with their schoolwork, because I want to have the answers. And instead of relying on the experience that I know that I have, sometimes I second guess my own experience, and I go to ChatGPT and ask, just to verify, am I right?
And here's something else, this might be a wild analogy, but I saw it this summer, and it's something I'd never seen before. I watch a lot of pro tennis, and only within the last 5 years are players allowed to have coaches coach them during a match. And I saw a match, I think it was Doshevich, who used to be the number 1 player in the world. And he was hollering at his coaches because they weren't giving him the right advice. And I thought to myself, wow, 5 years ago, up until then, players could not even get coaching advice during a match. And they had to rely on themselves. And now all of a sudden, this player who might be the best player of all time is mad because he can't get the advice from his coach. And I worry, it made me think about what you said earlier, Dan. It's a fine balance to how much do we allow kids to struggle, because I mean that's where the learning takes place, is with the struggle. And we don't like to see struggle, but it's important. But knowing how much to allow a kid to struggle, or even ourselves to struggle, is very difficult. At least I find it difficult.
Well, and as you guys have been talking, I was looking up a quote in Jurassic Park that resonates with me every single time I hear conversations about AI. And it says, I'll tell you the problem with the scientific power that you're using here. It didn't require any discipline to attain it. You read what others had done, and you took the next step. You didn't earn the knowledge for yourselves, so you don't take any responsibility for it. You stood on the shoulders of geniuses to accomplish something as fast as you could, and before you even knew what you had, you patented it, packaged it, and slapped it on a plastic lunchbox. Is that what we're doing with AI?
I love Jeff Goldblum.
I know. It's hard not to hear those words in his voice.
Oh, I'm going to use that. That quote sounds perfect for what you said, the article that you were reading. If we're just using the tool without the background knowledge, without the background history, and we're just give me a quick answer. We're not going to retain that. There's not going to be any struggle in understanding it. So we could be, I know, Caroline, we could be eroding our education. Caroline, I know you're looking at that, and I'll have you explain that. But yeah, we could be doing that if we're just looking for fast, quick answers, and yeah, that could be a problem.
Do you think it devalues the knowledge itself?
Absolutely. I think so. I mean, I think if you can just push a button and get the knowledge, as opposed to someone else who's had to struggle. Let's say you and I are going to write a blog piece, and I'm going to write it. Has to be even a book. You just wrote a book, Dan. I mean, imagine if you spent hundreds, probably thousands of hours writing that book, and there's people that are putting out books that are totally AI. And it, sometimes we can read pieces online and we can tell the difference. I mean, you can tell. I think it devalues it.
I mean, I've heard the same thing said about songs that are written by AI, that they're soulless. And I'm not saying it's not valuable, because it absolutely is, and it can help you, especially in a pinch. But we fall back on it and maybe use it as a crutch a little bit. Is it really hindering our progress instead of really helping it?
I don't use it as a crutch, I use it as a springboard. But that goes back, again, to knowing how to use it well. So I use it a lot for writing. And for me, it just takes the cognitive load off decent writing and checking my spelling, or switching between British and American English, or, it's the structure, put this in situation, problem, response, evaluation. It frees up all that cognitive load for me to really focus on my new ideas that aren't in the system, that I can develop. And I know I was chatting to some friends the other day, they're both pilots, about autopilot. Is it good or is it bad? And they were saying, well, from recent experience, one of them never uses it, one of them started using it, and then he felt he was losing his foundational skills, and he stopped using it to make sure he didn't lose his foundational skills. But then this made us question, okay, well, what positives can autopilot bring? And it can bring, these long distance flights, or these complex things that you have to deal with, search and rescue missions. It got us thinking about AI in relation to this co-pilot thing, is to use co-pilot. I keep saying co-pilot, autopilot. To use, I'm obsessed with the co-pilot AI now. So to use an autopilot, first you need to know how to fly. You're not even going to be able to get into a plane or get anywhere near autopilot until you know the fundamentals of how to fly a plane. Then when you're flying the plane, you can use autopilot, but remember, if you use it too much, you're going to lose those foundational skills. So you need to decide how much you use it. But then if you're using autopilot, it will allow you to do these things that you couldn't do without it. And I see this very much in relationship to AI. We've got to have the foundational skills first, then we can start using it. We need to be aware that overuse, over-reliance will lead to us losing skills. Then we can still use it to go on to those amazing things after that.
So, right, if I just go to whatever, I know we keep picking on ChatGPT or whatever program. If I just go to AI and keep grabbing answers, I'm losing my own cognitive abilities as a human. So yeah, Caroline, I'm agreeing with you. But if I'm using it to extend a hands or, my learning, that's different. So I'm not sure if the work we're putting out is hollow, but it's starting to make us hollow if we can't communicate with anyone. Like I can rattle off my dissertation to you because I wrote it. I have, what is that? Skin in the teeth in this. What's that phrase?
Skin in the teeth.
Yeah, thank you. and it's a passion, and it's mine. It's my ownership.
You struggled through it, yeah.
I struggled. I could talk about it. I could have intelligent conversation. If I just went to ChatGPT and asked it to put together a book for me, I don't know what's in there. I don't know what it says. That is more my fear than us constantly putting things out. What happens to us?
I'm always going to analogies, but I've heard a lot of times, and this could be either person, but a lot of husbands don't know where things are in their house or forget things because they rely on their wife or their partner. I can tell you there's a lot of things that go on in my household that I don't have a clue that I used to do, but now that I'm married, my wife takes care of these things, so I don't even know how to do that. Like, she takes care of all the finances. So I don't even know the mortgage company for our house right now. That's crazy, but I don't because I rely on her to do it. And so it makes me think of AI. If we rely on it to do certain things, do we lose that skill totally? I mean, does it atrophy?
When I was going through the article and things, it really had me thinking, if you had a pilot that was only in a simulator but never got to actually fly a plane, you don't really know if they're able to fly. You know that they can do that in the simulator, but not necessarily in reality.
So I made the bad joke that, but it works in the movies. And I think that's sometimes the problem too. Students are so hooked. Social media. Hey, it worked over here. I'm going to give that a try and do that too.
Carolina, I want to ask you, because you use AI every day with your students. Like you said, you are letting the horses run wild. At what point is it too much? Or is there ever a point when we're using it too much?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I must say the courses I've been teaching recently are about AI. One was mastering AI integration in education. Another one was using design thinking to find AI solutions. So obviously these courses were set up that AI was an integral part of the courses, which does make a difference, I think. So we were wanting to try out AI and wanting to critique it. So that's a good question. I mean, how much is too much and how do you know? I found out by experimenting in the classroom. And as I said earlier, when we were trying to do these design thinking projects, we worked, because it was about AI, so we were experimenting with AI to find out, what we could do, how we could use it for solutions, but we were also using it as part of our learning process. And as soon as the first parts of the project started coming to me, I realized the students had missed the whole point of the project. The project was to find a solution to fit a problem for a real-life stakeholder in the university. And I was just getting AI-generated reports and slides and visuals and rubbish that did not connect a problem. It didn't really drill down to the problem with the real stakeholder at the university based on the interview that they did. It didn't go through. They'd almost taken the stages of design thinking, thrown it into different AIs, kind of thrown a few of the ideas they had, and hoped that what came out the other end was gradable, and it's back to the product again. And 6 weeks into this course, we stopped, and I said, right, we're learning nothing, we're achieving nothing, we haven't got anything useful or tangible here that will help, the stakeholders with the project, and we've learned nothing through the process. Or have we? What we had learned was that if you don't use AI in a very careful, structured, thoughtful way, you just end up with rubbish. And I actually took that course back and reset it. And about 5 or 6 weeks in, we reset back to the start, having had this conversation. And then we went from there. And after that, then we were realizing we're actually looking for a real life, solution to a real life problem. This is more of our aim than just getting the grade at the end. And we're learning about how these tools can help us, but how can they can detract. I was saying, think about if you do the same thing in other courses. Are you learning from this, or are you just getting a final product? So those two things, how do you use it? What's your purpose? And at the end, I was blown away actually by the projects they came up with, absolutely blown away. And we've actually successfully implemented one of them at the university.
Dan, one thing I noticed, going back to the question, when is AI harmful? I was thinking about this as we're talking, and I noticed this last year. I think it's harmful when students are upset with the struggle. And I saw this last year with a student that I had who one of his tasks for the year was to learn, he had to write 3 complete sentences. And he was clever enough on his computer to find the dictation button. And he would talk the 3 sentences, which is fine at first. But then when I told him, no, you can't use that anymore, we're going to turn that off, because he was over-relying on it, he got very upset that he had to write 3 complete sentences. And he was upset with the struggle. And I think when our students get upset with the struggle because they haven't had to, because they over-rely on AI, I think that's the danger, and that's when it's harmful.
Well, and that's what I noticed this year too. The resistance that I got from students to the struggle. I had worked in a few additional components to each lesson. We were working on the science of reading, and so even though I teach social studies, it's a reading class, and so I wanted to bring in some more articles as well as vocabulary, but my students were really, really struggling with all of it. I went to my administrators and I said, am I doing too much? I said, these are all best practices. Every single one of them is a best practice. So at what point, though, do too many best practices become too much and too overwhelming, and there's not enough time to do it? One of the things that they told me was, you need to keep doing what you're doing, because essentially the kids need to grow through the struggle. And that has been a really difficult challenge, but trying to wrap my head around what is too much, or is it just that we don't like the struggle?
I think it's also back to that mindset again, too. The fact that you said, I'm giving articles for them to read in social studies. Well, yeah, of course. There has to be literacy across all content areas. It doesn't like, oh, hey, from 9 to 10 we're doing ELA, and then we're never doing again throughout the day. You still need those skills throughout the whole day. Well, we just had reading class. Why am I doing reading now in social studies? Of course you have to do reading in social studies. It's just a structure.
I think sometimes we forget that our kids actually are designed to enjoy a little bit of productive struggle. I'm thinking of my son who loves to play video games, and he will play it, and whatever kind of game they're playing, and they either lose or they die in the game, and they play it again, and they get a little better, and they play it again, and they get a little better. And recently he told me about one of his friends who kind of got a cheat code, and he had to pay actual money to buy a certain piece of equipment for this video game. And my son was telling me, he and his friends were laughing at this other kid because they know he really can't play the game, but he's got this cheat code. He got some special, it was a gun. It was like a shooting game, I think, fighting game. I shouldn't mention that, but I will. It's some sort of shooting game. And Derek's like, and he still really can't play. So it's almost like the over-reliance on it, whereas they don't mind the struggle. I mean, he'll play this game for 4 or 5 hours and they get better because they learn and they struggle and they learn and they struggle and they learn, and they do see steady progress. But when someone comes in like his friend who kind of cheated the process, they were laughing at him, and he wasn't as good. He didn't have the skills.
Before we leave for the day, I just want to ask each of you, are we overthinking this?
At this point, I think we're overthinking because at this point, everyone's not started or is in the race. So at the current moment, I would say we're overthinking it. Ask me again in a year.
We're all just experimenting. We're splashing around at the moment. We're not going to know how much is too much until we experiment with it. But I am in a very different situation. I'm in a lucky situation because I'm not in a school. I'm in a university, and I can I can design my own courses, write my own courses. It gives me this freedom to splash around and try things out. Very different, I think, if you're in a school and if you have to follow, certain prescribed curricula.
John, any thoughts, or should I go ahead and pick up the check?
I'll go back to what I said earlier. I think it's too much when our kids get upset when they have to struggle. And I've seen that firsthand just at a basic level. We don't use much AI in my building at all. It's actually banned in our county. But when kids are upset with the struggle, I think it's too much.
Dan, this week I'd like to offer to pick up the check, if that's okay, because I've made my passion my paycheck, as Julie nicely pointed out. This week it's on me.
Well, you're rolling in it then. All right. Sounds great. See you next week.
See you next week.
Thanks for listening. You can see links to all the resources mentioned in the show notes. And if you're a principal, superintendent, technologist, or CTO looking for creative ways to kickstart conversations about generative AI with your team, head over to Hacking GenAI in Education to access a growing library of stimulating conversation starters. Just click the link in the show notes or go to hackinggenai.org to start relevant conversations that will engage your entire team and take your AI discussions to the next level. Till next time, keep the conversation going.